Tonight we're sitting down with Dr. Danial Amernick. He was a former writer for the hit sitcom The Nanny, and he currently teaches screenwriting courses here at Marist College. Good evening, Dr. Amernick. Thank you very much for coming here.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Raphael.
So, just to start, as a screenwriter, your most notable work was during your 1996 to 1999 tenure with the hit CBS situation comedy, The Nanny.
Yes.
Could you paint for us a little picture, a brief vignette of what it was like to be in a writer's room in the late 90s?
There was a lot of food. What was really fun about that was that it was a very, it was unique because it was a very nurturing atmosphere, but it was, in terms of them, it was also very raucous, and it was fun, and everyone was very energized, and you had a lot of characters in there. As much as I always liked, in high school and college, to think that I was, maybe like the funny one in the group, compared to these characters on The Nanny, compared to that writing staff, I felt I was like the quiet, reserved one, because it was like you had these very, these great, I'll name check them because they were very nurturing, and they were really the ones who, along with Fran, helped kind of launch our career. But like Diane Wilk, who was one of the executive producers, and Frank Lombardi in particular, where there were these two, and they would just, no matter how late at night it was, you could always count on them to just do something funny, to pitch the right joke. But it was also just, you had this wild group of characters, and when it got late, we'd get a little punchy, and we'd get, and the funniest stuff never got on the air because we would pitch all this
push the limits a little bit.
Really not tasteless, but just stuff you would not put on an 8 o'clock family show in 1996 type of thing. But it was, and it was always, everyone just ate too much. The story that always comes to mind, because my brother still gives me, we still razz each other over this one incident where they at one point they had they'd cater, they'd cater us dinner. They would have this kind of local, kind of small, kind of one-woman operation, fixing us meals during rewrite nights. And one night, they were like, everyone saw what she was preparing, and they're like, "What? She's got it's a plate of shrimp the size of a video cassette. There's not enough to feed all of us." So we're like, let's order pizza. Let's order pizza. And so they end up engorging on the shrimp anyway. And then when the pizza came, they had the pizza too. And there was only me and another writer who had the self-restraint to just wait till the pizza came. And so my brother still is like, "Oh, aren't you such a person of virtue?" My brother to this day thinks, mocks me for,
not partaking in the gluttonous brainstorming session.
Type of thing. So yeah, that's, like I said, it was always funny. It was raucous. It was, and then they would just, and we would also make fun of just how tired, and and some of the writers were all like, I think that's where I get it when I'll make jokes about being all old and stuff. They would be always doing things about how this old comedy a go-go, I think they called it, because that we were stuck in the '60s, and we just sort of do sort of making fun of how 20 years from now they're going to be making fun of they're mocking the type of storylines we were coming up with, the same way we look back at Gilligan's Island and say, what were they thinking? We knew they were going to be like, oh God, look at this episode and be like, what was going on here?
Who in the room was able to reel in some of the more far out ideas that everyone was pitching? Was there anyone in the room to reel everyone in?
Peter Mark Jacobson, who was Fran's husband at the time, was good at reining us in. Rob Sternan and Prue Frazier, who were the executive producers, the showrunners, were also, they were very good at reining it in. But on a day-to-day basis, Peter was really the kind of because we would go way out these ideas, and Peter would be like, okay, we can't do that on TV. Here's what we can do. So, but it was good because it was always a relationship of mutual respect. And you look back in those days, and it's like we were spoiled because it was very nurturing. The fact that they were taking us under their wing like that. Even when we were kind of assistants, when we'd finish our day job, there was this period where they were sort of letting us audit the class. Basically, we'd come in after work and sit in the back, and And they'd encourage us to pitch jokes, and this is when we weren't even junior writers yet. We were still production assistants, and they would be like, we kind of, sheepishly whisper something to Wilk back in the room, and she'd be like, no, they said this, and she would sell the hell out of it. So they were really good at that. So again,
like Planet Fitness, it was a judgment-free zone.
Yeah. Oh, it was. I mean, if we pitched something, if we pitched something that was just like, what do you think? They would tease us about it. They'd be like, Amernick, what the hell was that? But it was always in a nurturing, fun way that they kind of encouraged us to do, to kind of go in and go for it and pitch and create.
Are there any particular oddball ideas that stand out in your memory that were pitched in the room?
Oh gosh, there was just an episode that I wish we had done. It was something we were talking about for the final season. We were kind of pitching Married when this is after Fran and Maxwell were married, and we were pitching. They called it the tenor of work was called the Full Maxwell off of the Full Monty, and I think the idea was that. It was something where Fran had maybe taped. It wasn't a sex tape, but she had taped him doing like a comedic bump and grind striptease, and then the tape gets mixed up with Gracie's school project, and they have to retrieve it. We were pitching that over the summer before that season started, and it never made it. But that one would have been. I think that one would have been really funny to see, because the way Frank was really acting it out and pitching the hell out of it when he was doing that. So
that sounds hilarious.
Yeah, that's the one that comes to mind. But again, it's funny because I used to have such there was so many ideas that came, so many things that kind of just, it's like a barrage of different pitches, and some of the stuff we would pitch for the tags. That was one of the things when they were first kind of grooming us to do that. To be writers, we'd write. This was sort of in season 4, season 5, and we would write the tags, and we would kind of go out. We would come up with 5 different ideas, and the best one they'd stick. But at that point, they were really just letting us kind of go all out, so you can look at those episodes from season 4, and they almost have a bizarre Simpsons-like humor in those tags because they are kind of little standalone things, and those they just let us run wild with.
What were some of the particular advantages and pitfalls to working so closely with your brother in the writer's room?
Well, I was going to say the advantages were that we could carpool, but we didn't even do that because we were living together and working together. It was Lenny and Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley, just spending. I mean, the advantages. I'll have to get back to you on that. No, the disadvantages were. He's gonna kill. Sorry, Jay. The advantages were that actually when we were actually we could work, when we had a script assignment that we had to turn around, we could just, we didn't have to, there was no commuting, it was just, we lived in the apartment, we'd just go out in the living room and do that. The disadvantages were that we were just, driving each other nuts, and, being that, not that much older than you are now, being that young and, immature, I guess, and it being our first job. So there was that, youthful, whatever, insouciance, or whatever, however you want to describe it. I guess one of the advantages, was also just that it was such a hook. I think that's part of what sold us to them as a concept, was that these two brothers, and everybody had their own sort of vision of what our home life must have been like. They were sort of picturing Ernie and Bert with the matching headboards, the twin beds next to each other. And they had this whole thing, and they used to picture bunk beds with matching cowboy pajamas. They had this whole narrative going, and we just run with it. But
of course.
I think it was just that the advantages were that we could, as brothers, as cruel as we got to each other at times, you could say anything to each other.
Tact was thrown to the wind occasionally.
And you don't it's if those type of conversations were happening with a friend, or a professional partner, you probably say things that you can't take back, but that you say to your brother, and it's okay, well, this is pretty hideous, but it's our family. So
Um, at what point in your career did you make the decision to transition from a world of Hollywood screenwriting to that of academia?
It's a great question. I always say, whenever I kind of do the little basic intro to who I am during the first day of class, I always kind of gloss over the Las Vegas year. There's sort of, some years are just a blank spot out of a guy's life, is how I put it. That was, again, there was sort of a slow progression, after the nanny ended, and then, we were sort of doing these sort of freelance assignments, trying to sell screenplays, and we get these sort of almost, kind of what you almost get the brass ring, and then something happens, and so we were doing that, and I transitioned. I was doing the soap stuff. I was working for Sony, and then later Disney SoapNet, and writing little recaps and doing like soap opera recaps of Young and the Restless and all that. And there was some fun stuff there, and got to have some fun little stories. But after that ended, really, because Disney SoapNet was very, very good to me, and they kept me around probably longer than I deserved to be. I think they were really nice. They took care of me, and they let me telecommute from Vegas for like a year and a half, and they let me kind of write all the recaps. So that was really nice of them. And but after that ended, there was sort of this diminishing return. I was in Vegas thinking, well, I could take everything that I've got, the creative stuff, the non-TV stuff, and try to apply it. Maybe work at it, do creative marketing in a casino or do something like that. And nothing was happening, so it was a lot of diminishing returns in Vegas, which is fitting because, everybody's down at the tables on Vegas. It's just one giant gambit. But and I think well, I'll segue into what would happen. But prior to that, there was I got my bartender's certification there. I don't know if I ever mentioned that here. I wouldn't mention it to students because it's probably not something really want to talk about on the first day of classes, that your teachers, that your professor's a mixologist. But, I think really planted the seed, because that was the first time I was like, it's the first time I could pay for tuition out of my pocket. The last time I could pay for tuition out of my pocket, so that was a selling point. But also, that was the first time, as goofy as this sounds, taking that bartending class, taking that 3-week intensive course at the Crescent School of Gaming and Bartending in a strip mall that next to a clinic that looked like it specialized in hepatitis B. That was the first time where I really thought, okay, well, I do have the aptitude to do something, to go back to school, as goofy as that sounds. And so then I was, again, but it was all these diminishing returns and doing these freelance jobs, doing these weird internet SEO type writing, and just for these sort of shady operations. And then that moment I was like really seeking out. I wanted to go back and teach, and that was what I was was doing when I first got to Vegas, looking into teaching, because they had schools, they needed teach. There was a big population growth, but fortunately they were looking for more math and science, not my two subjects. And so I was cold calling a lot of schools at that point, and thinking, well, seeing if they had anything for a grizzled old ex-sitcom writer. And they're like, well, it's a neat resume, but we can't. A lot of these schools would be like, we can't even consider seeing you without a master's degree. And so at that point, I'm like, these haughty, I'm sort of being dismissive, and I'm like, yeah. And then, of course, later I find out, yeah, they were right, but at the time, I was just like, okay, had to sort of be dragged kicking and screaming. But I realized, as I was working for these sort of shady characters and the writing content for these pyramid scheme people and doing all this stuff.
Was it more the advertising copy that you were working on?
I was writing these training videos, these kind of the creative marketing stuff I'd been doing sort of for Disney, and they were giving me even freelance after they let me go for a while, and they were great. That I liked. I loved working with Disney. Was always good. It was this other place, and I'm not going to name them but it was just this outfit in Las Vegas that did these sort of internet training video, these sort of interactive training videos that people this service, and it was not. It was just this very, it was a very you know, questionable operation of how the owner, CEO slash whatever, he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna. I can just see him like watch, you know.
Don't want to put you in any danger.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, he's the type who would put me in crosshairs. And that the diminishing returns was that, because I was like, for the first part of that job, it was like, okay, I'm content. I can ride this out. It's a job in a crap. I can't say crappy, can I? In a lousy, in a lousy Vegas economy. To have a job at that point, I was like, you know, I'll just ride it out. But then when everything just started to fall, it was like this slow decline. I'm like, I got to do this, and I'm like, I got to. So no matter how tired I am and exhausted from doing this job, I'm gonna come home and study for my GRE. I'm gonna come home and do the applications and do that process. And that job got so bad that me and my supervisor were like, you know, we can't take it anymore. He's like, you know, let's walk out together. Let's do this. Let's quit together. And we did. And you know, we got our last laugh in that regard. And then like not too long afterwards, I got my acceptance into grad school. I got my acceptance letter into Newhouse. So I was like, okay, I think I've made the right the universe.
That door closed, the right door opened.
And so that was kind of how that happened. I mean, it's the truncated version. I've left out a lot of names and places.
That is completely all right.
I'll tell you that stuff when the cameras are off.
Recently, your research titled "The Not Ready for Archive Players: The Lost Seasons of Saturday Night Live" was recently published. First of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
What were some of your research objectives? What was your central argument? What were you setting out to prove?
Well, thank you. That's a fun question, because it was originally this article was originally conceived as a project for a class I was taking during my master's program at Syracuse. It wasn't even at a Newhouse class. It was in this communication, rhetorical studies department. And one of my, it was a public memory class, and they dealt with the archive, but in this very, you know, it was very academic. Excuse me. One of my favorite professors from that, certainly from that department, but one of my favorite classes was Professor Bradford Vivian, and he was terrific. And so the idea behind it was this sort of, we're talking about like the role of like the archive, and how he who can, or she who controls the archive kind of controls this sort of knowledge, or you know, has a sort of there's a certain political power with controlling the archive. So it was an archival defense really of these seasons that have been not fully excised from the Saturday Night Live history, but they've been sidelined in syndication. They'll pop up occasionally, but they've never been, like, the first 5 years of Saturday Night Live, the golden years, those first seminal seasons, you all got the red carpet treatment on DVD and got the full season sets, with the music and the whole thing, you know, as they aired. Those years, 80 to 85, and this is when Lorne Michaels leaves the show, right. And when Dick, there's a whole thing first. His former associate producer Jean Doumanian, aka they refer to as the Ayatollah Doumanian, she earned that one apparently, and so she took over for the first and helmed the first replacement cast. And at the time, nowadays it's easy to bring in new cast members. At the time, the prevailing sentiment was, you know, how can you replace the Beatles? Basically, that's how they were felt, and so then that played into the perception, and so there's sort of this didactic thing where it's like we've been told and retold that those 5 seasons are worthless, save the contributions of Eddie Murphy. The only thing that, you know, is what, you know, everyone remembers. And so that's kind of how the history has been rewritten, and so it's kind of provided an excuse to not show them in syndication as much. When Netflix was running all the seasons, I noticed that those particular episodes were really cut up. I mean, it was like they would have like 20-minute long episodes. So the argument was to make these years kind of available in some format in their entirety. You know, just so you wouldn't. Just to kind of answer the questions about its role in Saturday Night Live's history, its role in kind of comedy history, its role in culture, and even from a political standpoint, because one of the things, I won't get too political here. I'll stay off the hot topics, but over the years, obviously Saturday Night Live was a big, important, in terms of the question of how the show may have influenced perceptions of political candidates. There was more recently there was research about a Fey effect, whether Tina Fey's portrayal of Palin helped reinforce the kind of the idea of Palin as provincial or what have you. It turned out that Sarah Palin did a pretty good job reinforcing her own vision of her as provincial and not to whatever.
Right.
So there's about perception, and so the role that's about the Bush and Gore debates and how that had a kind of a sense of the perception, viewer perception of those characters. But what we don't have is, or having these, it's hard to see now, but what's missing is, if we had those episodes 80 to 84, we could at least sort of consider whether they were apolitical or whether they were kind of softballing Reagan a bit and kind of whether they were normalizing Reagan to the point that led to his reelection. Those questions that we could sort of, we'd have to take a time machine to really suss it out.
But the conversation could at least be had.
Yes, because there's sort of a, because they're gone, because the episodes, they're not gone, but they're rarely seen in their entirety. It's based on whatever whoever has their Dick Ebersol, who replaced and Gene Domanian, kind of likes to overstate his, according to some, likes to overstate his contributions, and so there's just a lot of unanswered questions that could be resolved about the show and the show's history if those episodes were available. And so I was really kind of interested, and also because that was, I was, when the show first came on, I was like the little kid trying to stay up late, trying to watch it, but by the time Eddie Murphy was on the air, and those were the episodes that I was first, kind of could sit through, old enough to sit through and get the humor. I mean, not even didn't get everything, but I was kind of, discovering Saturday Night Live in junior high at that time. And of course, Eddie Murphy was, fantastic. He did. No disrespect to the other cast members. He was doing a lot of the heavy lifting in those years. But it'd be nice to see if anybody else during that period, if their contributions were overlooked, if it really was just, gotta go back together. That's when we've been working long days. Sorry.
Completely all right.
So that's, sorry, I got off track there. So that's kind of that was sort of and so it was this project for this class, and then, we keep me from something? Sorry. I'm just messing with you, man. A little punchy myself. And so that was done in 2012, and it was this paper that I really liked. It got into a conference the following year, but it then was sort of, without getting political, with more recent political events as far as certain guest hosts on Saturday Night Live and the question of whether that appearance hypothetically normalized certain candidates. The paper became relevant again, or at the very least there was new material to kind of put a fresh coat of paint on, and that's kind of what kind of spurred me to say, well, this was a paper, it did me well in grad school, let's revisit this, make it, kind of update it and send it to the academic journals, and that's kind of how that happened.
Exciting.
So yeah, it was. Thank you. It was fun. It was a fun project. I think that's the key for academic research, whether you're doing it on the undergrad level or whether you're doing, those who decide to go to grad school, or if you decide to do a research paper for your capping project, just pick a subject you love. Just pick something you really. And for me, I loved writing about Saturday Night Live, and I loved researching that as much as I could that period. So that's my advice on that.
How did your approach to writing a research-based scholarly article differ from your typical writing process in the comedy world?
They're actually, in some ways, they're similar. I think, in some ways, I joke with tongue firmly in cheek that the real world prepare me for school better than school prepare me for the real world in some ways. In that, just the sort of the organizational skills and crafting a story and crafting a narrative that both kind of were there and part of the process. And that's kind of how you kind of bring that sort of same, it's like, in sitcoms, you're making a treatment or an outline, and in here, you're making a similar treatment or an outline, and here's what each section is going to be. Here's where we're building towards. So it's the two skill sets can kind of help, feed each other, I guess.
Do you find one style of writing more challenging than the other?
That's a good question. Sorry, the turkey sandwich is repeating on me. Sorry about that.
That's where the proximity will.
Yeah. Sorry, but yeah. No, so, what was the question? It was about which one is more challenging?
Yes, which style of writing?
Gosh, yeah, they both have their challenging aspects because it's like, well, you have with like I said, with academic, there's a certain syntax and there's a certain structure. With sitcoms, like if I wanted to sit down and write an original pilot and do that, I could, crank something out in fairly, within a week or so. If I wanted to do an academic research project, that's going to take me more along the lines of a semester. And the goals, I don't want to say the stakes are higher, but yeah, you want with an academic paper, you want everything to be perfect. You want to be able to send it into the journals and have as minimal revisions as possible because they can be. I got very lucky with this one because they were minimal. But you hear horror stories about people spending a year or on a topic, and then they'll just come back with these notes that are like you have to envision this entire section. So it's So in that regard, the academic style is much more challenging because I think of the rigors of it.
The current state of television is often described as a golden age. Does that ever inspire a potential return to the writer's room for you? Do you ever feel a desire to go back?
No, I've always said those were the 5 funniest, and my students are probably sick of me saying this. Those days in the Navy, they were the 5 funniest years of my life, easily. I miss that group of people. I really do love I don't really want to go back. I really do enjoy being a professor a bit more. I always, the dignified, mature Dr. Amernick and all that, but I love it. I do love it. Like I said, I miss those people. I miss working with those people in the nanny, but I just, like I said, at this point, it's like, I kind of feel like, Obi-Wan in the original Star Wars is, now it's his time to train the new Jedi. I've done my time out there. It's just time to kind of take to kind of show you all how it's done and send you off to give it a try. Also because the type of things that I write, the other side of it is the type of things I write and would want to write are kind of very different. There's still part of me that would want to do something like an old school, like a Taxi or a Mary Tyler Moore. And we've really gotten away from the from like a smart multicam. We don't really see that kind of, like a Cheers or a Taxi or a Mary Tyler Moore. And so we've kind of gotten away from that. The hipper shows are usually, kind of the things that people are looking to write for are the single camera. And the single camera, they're doing it very well. I think, I think, The Good Place is hysterical. I think that show was just constantly made me laugh. But like I said, stylistically, I'm just sort of, I really cut my teeth on the multicam. I don't think there are things I would love to write. My dream would be to try to make a show out of that grad school experience, out of trying. We always talked about this at grad schools. What's the tone? We always sort of picture like St. Elsewhere meets Northern Exposure, meets whatever, but sort of a kind of a crazy, kind of a wild, kind of hour-long but funny. But that would be my dream if I could write, to do something where it's like that autobiographical, where you have the burnt-out ex-comedy writer going back to school as a middle-aged college student would be kind of a fun thing to write with all those characters. But I'm always like, well, yeah, but what's it going to be about? But for the most part, I just don't feel like I necessarily have, I think it's time, it's time for me to step aside and let the new generation, do their thing. That being said, if I were to ever train you characters and give you the abilities to go out and create your own show, then if you brought, my geriatric self in there for a week to do an episode, I would do that.
What excites you about that next generation of writers that you're currently mentoring?
Specifically the ones here?
Yeah.
No. Sorry, no. In all seriousness, is I think just the idea. It's always fun hearing everyone's ideas, and because you've all pitched some really, whenever you kind of come up with that treatment, that first proposal. There's always everyone's coming up with some really like fun stuff, some kind of really thinking, coming up with some new ideas, and also just the enthusiasm. I think that's why I really take a premium of wanting to write. Show when we in the class in 301 screenwriting, we show we look at the classic stuff. We'll look at The Odd Couple and Mary Tyler Moore, but then we'll also make sure to look at Parks and Rec and kind of the more contemporary. And I like showing everybody how the similarities, that there's a lineage, but also so the excitement is seeing everybody react to the classic stuff and seeing it's stuff material that students necessarily haven't seen before. And so that's kind of, you can see where it's sort of starting to affect their storytelling imagination. They're like, okay, they would like to write characters like this, and now they're seeing kind of a material that's kind of not always readily available to them, and they get excited about it. And so seeing them kind of respond that they're going to kind of bring the best of the old stuff, and they're going to take that but give it their new, contemporary twist that only they can, because right. Comedy is humor and writing. It's not that it's a young person's game, but it can't because you do get more you do gain perspective as you get older, but there's a certain the best of both worlds is to have a room where you have a mix of old and young. But yeah, it's so it's exciting. It's just seeing everybody and what they're going to do and watching them, because they don't always students don't always take the class thinking, okay, I want to write. It's an elective, and students here tend to be kind of not. Certainly kind of geared towards production. And that's great. So I like to hopefully the exciting thing is to have them walk away thinking, okay, well maybe I can write. Maybe now I want to do this and I want to stick with this.
Has any idea pitched in a classroom been more bizarre than the oddball ideas that were pitched in that writer's room in the 90s?
I mean, I don't want to say, they're bizarre, but in a good way bizarre. Yes. Yeah, I would say that because students were coming up with some really, especially like some of my advanced classes too, coming up with some really interesting material and some really kind of things that I really wanted them. I hope that because they weren't necessarily majors either. It was just that they liked the 301 class. They wanted to stick with it. And I really hope that they stick with it. It was like one did a student going. It was a college. It was a student going undercover in this sort of underground journalism society, and it was really clever. And I thought, and when she pitched it to the class, an advanced class, everybody thought for a second they were like, oh wait a minute, this isn't a real show on the air. I mean that's how I think well conceived it was, is that it was people thought it was a real show, and so it was, but it was definitely not your typical fare.
Right.
So yeah, so people have been kind of getting kind of interesting and experimental, and I'm glad they're doing that, because sometimes I always worry. I'm like, okay, am I sometimes I don't want to say holding everyone back, but sometimes I feel like, okay, I'm spending a lot of time trying to teach everybody the bass. Just you want to know that it's like if you want to teach someone guitar, they have to learn the blues chord progression. And I'm kind of emphasize. I'm not going to throw them into complicated free-form jazz
Yeah, no.
exploration. And there is certainly a merit to learning to write. To write more experimental stuff as well. But it's something I'm very busy teaching them, how it was done then, how it's done now in more of the traditional broadcast. But people are, kind of taking that and bringing what they know to Netflix, the kind of the Netflix style, which is a bit more, it still has a beginning, middle, end, but it's less pronounced than what you might see on a broadcast show.
The structure and the style is becoming more creative.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. Best of luck with your show. This inaugural episode. What's the show called again?